Welcome to this week's edition of Prep Zone Extra Points, sponsored by John Hoffer Jeep Chrysler. This week featuring Rick Peterson, Tim Bisel, and Brent Maycock.
Hey, high school sports fans. We're back with another edition of Extra Points. I am Tim Bisel, the executive sports editor here at the Topeka Capital-Journal and CJ Online. This week, just joined by one, Mr. Rick Peterson, our city beat reporter. Brent Maycock is playing the role of dutiful husband and father tonight, as he should. So we'll see if we can make it without him. I suppose we'll be all right. Anything?
Yeah.
Well, it was an awfully good night on the high school scene tonight. We have several really compelling games to talk about. We'll start with our city game of the week, which saw Washburn Rural defeat Topeka High 17-7. Rural's defense kind of shined in this one, and the Junior Blues also rode a couple of big passing plays to a key victory against the Trojans. For Topeka High, Kai Thomas had 198 rushing yards in a losing effort. In our area game of the week, Manhattan holds off Junction City 27-22 behind another big night from Ian Trapp, who kind of starred on both offense and defense tonight. In other city action, Hayden 23, Shawnee Heights 20. Another really fantastic game decided with no time on the clock, actually, as Patrick Elrich kicks a game-winning 46-yard field goal to give the Wildcats a come-from-behind 23-20 victory. Topeka West gets its first win of the season, edging Highland Park 29-20 tonight. Big night for Zach Shima that we'll get into a little bit later. And last but certainly not least, Seaman with another nice showing, beating Emporia 35-20. Big night for Dalton Cowan, passing the ball also. Pistol, that brings us to our first segment tonight, starting points. A lot of things to talk about, a lot of things that we could potentially talk about, but where do you want to start?
Well, Washburn Rural, that's, Steve Bueller's been a very successful high school coach, had a great run at Rossville. He's done a good job at Washburn Rural, but the one thing that had eluded them is a marquee win over a 6A team. And they got that tonight. And I think that will only pay dividends as they move forward. Sometimes you got to get to the top of the hill several times before you actually get over that hump. They got to the top of the hill against Junction City in a heartbreaking 22-21 loss on a safety. Tonight they got over that hump. It's their first win over High since 2008. They're now in great position to get a home field for the first game of the playoffs in Week 9. That's a big win for Washburn Rural tonight.
The good thing about that, too, is Bueller has made no secret about his desire to get that win. He started talking about that before the season even began, I remember, from your preview in our preview section.
Yeah, and they had played well against Manhattan a couple times in the past, and like I said, the win earlier against Junction City, but they just needed to get that one win to get them over the hump. And I really think, they're sitting there at 4-2. They got a great chance if they take care of business of ending the regular season at 6-2, and it's a good. And you know what? Before we go any further, High's still fine too. High had several missed opportunities tonight. When I talked to Coach Alexander after the game, he said, this is one we kind of let get away. They had down inside the one a couple of times and just couldn't punch it in. Early in the third quarter, they had a chance to go up 14-10 and got stopped like an inch.
Inches,
yeah. So they're going to be fine too, but it was Rural's night.
Yeah, I think Topeka High, it's safe to say, a pretty good 3-3 football team.
Yes.
Well, we can dig into that game a little bit more as we move into our points of emphasis segment, or we can talk about any number of games because, like I said earlier, there were some awesome performances to discuss tonight. The one thing that jumped out at me is we had some really standout individual performances, a couple notable ones from quarterbacks. Zach Shima did a little bit of everything for Topeka West. Ian Trapp kind of starred both on offense and defense for Manhattan. And then we also had big performances from Dalton Cowan and Ryan Hennington, too, even for Junction City in a losing effort. Any of those, and there's, we had some other performances as well that were pretty notable. Any favorites for you?
Yeah, and you didn't even mention it. The favorite I have is Patrick Elrich, just because a 46-yard field goal. Obviously, if K-State kicks a 46-yard field goal last week, they win. There's times I've seen NFL kickers that couldn't deliver in the crunch from 46 yards.
Absolutely.
So that catches my attention. And then you go on down. Dalton Cowan, 343 yards, 4 TDs, 71, 70, and 64-yard TDs. His receivers are very good. Nick Steiner, 6 for 175 and 2 TDs. Kevin Moran's 5 for 109 and 2 TDs, and also had a TD rushing. Shima, he had 99 rushing, 99 passing, 68 rushing, 2 TD passes, 1 TD rush, and also recovered a fumble in the end zone for a TD.
Right after throwing an interception, I believe.
Right, exactly. And he has to do all that for West because he is their unquestioned leader.
Right.
And he took him on his shoulders tonight and got him that win, which was much needed.
I really liked Todd Fertig's line about Shima. I think he had said something to the effect of he did everything but pop the popcorn tonight and
drive the bus.
And drive the bus, absolutely.
And he did drive the bus.
And yeah, who knows? We didn't actually get on the bus with him, so we might be erring there. Some other performances that we should probably point out. You mentioned the 2 solid receiving performances for Seaman. And as good as both Steiner and Moran's were, they kind of paled in comparison to Emporia's Bryce Crouch, who had 283 yards and 2 TDs on 7 catches. That's a heck of a night for anybody.
And I'll throw in Colin Wilson of Washburn Rural. He catches a 64-yard touchdown pass on the very first play from scrimmage. On the second play from scrimmage, after they blocked a field goal, he catches an 86-yard TD pass that was wiped out by penalty. He had 3 catches for 124 yards. He had a 59-yarder later that set up a TD. He has 3 catches for 124 yards without the 86-yarder. So that puts him over 200 receiving. So it was a great night. It was a great night for kickers, great night for receivers. And obviously, Dalton Cowan that's got to be a career high for him with the 343 yards.
It might have been the air. I was telling somebody earlier today that for the first time, it just kind of felt like football weather for me. When I walked out of my house this morning, there was a little nip in the air. It was probably in the mid to upper 50s, and it just kind of felt like football season. And maybe that was enough to get all these guys going.
Yeah, well, when I walked into Hummer Sports Park tonight, the rural staff, including Coach Bueller, were staying outside, and that's what we said, just a perfect night for football.
Absolutely. A couple other guys that I wanted to touch on real briefly, and we've mentioned them already, but Ian Trapp, I said, starred on both offense and defense. He had 245 total yards today and 3 TDs, but even more importantly, kind of like Shima, he made a play late to kind of secure Manhattan's win, picking off a pass, a Hennington pass that gave them the win, and actually I think clinches at least a share of the Centennial League title for the Indians.
Yes, because they're a game ahead of some of the teams because they got one non-league game coming up. So yeah, they're 5-0 now, and they, even if they would lose next week or whenever it is they play their last game, nobody could do any better than tie them.
And then Hennington, despite the late pick, he had a brilliant performance, especially on the ground. 266-yard rushing performance. I haven't seen that kid play other than on TV. They had one of the game of the weeks on Cox 22, and I got to see him a little bit. But he's putting up some pretty good numbers this year.
Well, you mentioned all these guys. We met, and it's going to be tough come all city, all league type thing because you got several great receivers, you got several great kickers, you got several great quarterbacks, you got several great running backs.
Right.
It's going to be, somebody's going to get the short end of the straw and be a very, very good football player.
Absolutely. There's going to be some really good players that end up on the second team or even honorable mention this year, which is just speaks to the volume of guys that are out there having great years. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for our points of emphasis segment. That brings us to kind of our last little take here. What's your exclamation point for the night?
Kickers. Kickers are the position that you really don't hear about them until they miss. You know, you hear more about them when they miss than you do when they are successful, unless tonight when it's a game-winning field goal. A couple weeks ago with Walker Bassett kicking a game-winning field goal for Seaman. But just tonight, we had the 46-yard field goal by Patrick Elridge. You had a 42-yard field goal by Shawnee Heights' Tyler Zentner. You had a 41-yard field goal by Washburn Rural's Ross Boyd in my game. And I mentioned Walker Bassett, who went into the week leading the city in kick scoring, had the game winner against Heights a couple weeks ago. There's been years in my career where an extra point was always an adventure. Yep. And these guys extra points are automatic, and they're really good from, they're capable kickers in the mid-40s range. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of them didn't take a try anyway at a 50-yard field goal. That is where high school football, at least in this area, has really improved.
Yeah. I'll be curious to see if any of these kids get an opportunity to go on and play collegiately. You would think with legs like that, some schools would be looking at it.
Yeah, and Zentner and Boyd, who are both soccer players, have just been booming the ball out of the end zone on kickoffs. And there's a lot, again, going back to, there's a lot of colleges and pros that are looking for guys that can do that.
Yeah, I feel a little bit bad for Zentner. A lot of nights he'd kind of be a hero. He kicks the field goal to get them tied, and then if that game goes to overtime, who knows, maybe he gets another chance to play hero, but he's kind of an afterthought just because he was upstaged by Elric, which is late kick. But anyway, great night tonight for high school football. We're glad you guys could join us. Log on to cjonline.com and prepzone.com for all your high school coverage. Thanks.